Now that we have everything modeled, we need to UV it. And UVing objects like this is both, there's a really easy, quick way to do it, but you'll never have perfect UVs without any distortion or stretching, without cutting it up a lot. And if you remember, the more cuts you make, the more noticeable it will be in your texture. Now for these chess pieces, the texture is going to be relatively simple. I'm probably just going to either put a wood or a marble texture on it, and you won't really notice if there's a whole lot of distortion. So we're going to make it as easy as we can. If you had something with a much more intricate texture on it, with say very mechanical with different nuts and bolts on it, you'd be a little bit more worried about distortion, but this is not as important. So I'm going to open up my planar mapping options, and I always have it set to camera and keep image width height ratio. Then hit apply, and this is what I have. The first thing I'm going to do is cut off the bottom. I'm just going to select that edge loop, come over here and cut. And it's going to move it out of the way and unfold it. Next, I am going to come to the back. It doesn't really matter since it's perfectly symmetrical, but I'm going to select the back anyway. If I double click the edge in the 3D viewport, it will go from the very top to the very bottom, past this cut that I made, and it will also cut the bottom. And the bottom's already done. I don't want it to be cut any further. If I double click an edge in the UV editor, it will stop when it comes to a cut edge. So there's a difference in making your selection in the UV editor against the 3D viewport. I'm going to cut here as well and unfold it. If we turn on, we can see that there is a fair amount of distortion. I am going to cut this top off right there where it kind of indents. Do another unfold. You can see the bottom part is much better. There's still some discoloration, but it will work. Now this top piece will always have some troubles. If you want, you can cut off this top little loop. Merge those edges back together and have something like this. There is still going to be some distortion, but overall it is not bad. I'm just going to do a layout, and let me reset my layout settings. I'm not worried about where they are right now. I just want them to be organized. And I'm going to move them. Actually, I'm just going to leave them there and just select my next piece. Everything will be UV'd in a very similar way, except for the knight. The rook, these are going to be UV'd separately, these top little parts, but the bottom is going to be the same. I'm going to start with a planar map. And when you're UVing, always make sure to get out of the smoothing preview, which is 3, hit 1, so you are no longer in that smoothing preview. Going to cut off that bottom and unfold it. And pick an edge, that one. Going to cut it and unfold. This one I'm definitely going to cut off the top. It is very similar to the bottom. It is a flat piece of geometry. So I'll make a cut right here, right at the edge where there's a change in direction. And I'm going to sew that back together and unfold it. Now hopefully this unfold will look pretty good. And then what's left are these top pieces. Now they are identical, so you could just UV one of them, delete the others, and duplicate it around, but it's a relatively easy thing to UV. And I'm just going to select these corner edges. Let me change my camera. Get a little bit closer. When I'm UVing something like this, I want to find that corner edge that doesn't go all the way around. If I selected this edge, it would cut off this entire right side of my object, which I do not want. This one is right in the center, and it stops because there's the forks into two different directions. I'm going to get the same edge on all corners on all of the objects. I'm going to cut that. And again, you can just do one and duplicate it. I don't feel like doing that, so I'm going to make a quick selection. Over here, going to cut all of them, select the UV shells, and unfold them all. Then select everything again and just do a layout. I don't really like how it did this layout. I don't want these scattered around at different angles, so I'm just going to move them together so they're all at the same orientation. Bishop, going to start with that planar mapping again. And I'm going to make several cuts, so I have several UV shells, because this one does have a lot of change in directions. And I'm going to try to hide the cuts as best as possible. So I'm going to cut here, right on the the smallest edge loop, where it goes in. And I'm going to make another one right here. Another one kind of hidden right there. And right here. I'm also going to make a cut in the back and just deselect that bottom. Now hopefully when I unfold, I will have some okay looking UV shells. Has a little bit more red than the others. Just like with the pawn, I'm going to cut this very top circle off. And that looks a little bit nicer. But for what we're doing, that should be alright. The queen and the king are more or less the same as these. For mine, I have this extra little crown up here, which I cut off to be its own UV shell, but everything else was the same. And the king is relatively easy, and this piece was its own UV shell as well. For now, let's do the horse, or the knight. And I'm going to start with a planar mapping. And I'm going to cut the bottom off. So that bottom chunk, and then the base is also going to get cut off. And I'm going to select this edge in the back, and cut. And that should be alright for that one. And the top part looks like it'd be pretty difficult, but it's actually not. I added this center edge loop down, which helps with UVing. And I'm just going to select it in the UV editor, so I only get the horse selected so it doesn't go all the way through the base as well. And I'm going to cut it. Now I have a front and a back of the horse, and I'm going to unfold. And for now, that is all I'm going to do for the knight. We have 4 objects UV'd. It looks like a huge mess right now, but that's because everything is on top of each other. Finish the queen and the king, and in the next video we're going to go over how to do a UV layout, so you can have the same texture for multiple objects.